Okay, thanks, Lillian. Welcome everybody to another Future Teacher Reborn session. For those that are new to Future Teacher, we've run these sessions over a number of years now, and the latest round of sessions is under the banner of Reborn. You'll find on the resource that I'm screen sharing links to all of the previous sessions dating back to 2017, I believe. And today's session on practical approaches to PDF, you'll find the registration form. We leave that open because people sign up the last few moments. And then you'll find this panel where you can read the welcome, the summary of the two guest speaker presentations today, a link to related resources, and then what next. So we'd encourage you to, and also I think from about 1:30, I've set it to release the registration form for the June session, so you can refresh the page and see that. Should all be self-explanatory to browse all our previous recordings and sessions and presentations. So I'll stop my screen sharing and hand over to Lillian, who's going to introduce our first guest speaker, I believe.
Yeah, and our first guest speakers, Jade, Alethea, and Lucy from the Open University. So they're going to be telling us about their OU HTML Highway project, which is about dealing with PDFs, which are really problematic for accessibility, as we all know. So they're going to share with us how they're actually moving colleagues along in converting from PDF to a more accessible format. So over to Jade, Alethea, and Lucy.
Thank you so much for having us here today. It's a really nice opportunity to be able to take you through how we handle PDFs at scale and trying to make things more accessible. Alethea, you're in charge of the slides. I was wondering if you could move us on to the next one. The next one. Thank you. So when I say handling PDFs at scale, I really mean trying to handle PDFs at scale. It's a bit of a can of worms. It's also a massive change management piece, and we all know how difficult it is to make people change their understanding and their perceptions and awareness, and also their ways of working. So the HTML Highway project has really been a means to try to get off the ground with and embed a consistent and clear approach to making things more accessible with HTML. Today, we're not going to do a deep dive into how to remediate PDFs. I don't think we'd have the time to do that justice. But what we do have is in the chat, we have Joycelyn and Stephen who can answer any questions and share some additional resources if required. I've put on the slide here some quotes that we're very often used to hearing at the OU. And when we first had the idea for this project, there was a bit of a panic and everyone was like, oh, stop trying to take away my right to create PDFs. And we had to really calm everyone down and say, look, we're not trying to do that. We really need to understand and investigate PDF usage. It's all part of an awareness piece, really, this change management. So raising awareness, educating, before then we can start to implement some changes. There are many benefits to moving away from PDFs. And when I'm talking here about PDFs, we're not actually very interested in the academic publishing side of PDFs. We're looking at the ones that we use around the institutions, the ones that people are just hitting convert to PDF and sending all over the place. The next quote I've put on there, I've always done it this way, leave me alone. And this is kind of where we need to step in and educate people, dispel myths, really look at the benefits of moving away from inaccessible PDFs. So things like accessibility, consistency, controlling versions, being more mindful about how we're creating and publishing digital content. And it all feeds into all of that digital governance and managing our digital estate more effectively. But I really like PDFs. This was another thing that we encountered. People are really, they're really emotional about PDFs. We found this out, and they're very committed to them. Again, feeding in this awareness piece of pointing out the problems that we find with PDFs. And Lucy will later show you some of the resources that we've created to try and separate people, create some distance there. What's my next quote? It can't be that hard to create an accessible PDF. And this is where we step in and go, oh, but it is. It's not a case of just hitting the accessibility checker, which only does a very basic check of the accessibility of a PDF. Also thinking that this is a compliance piece. Basic checks just aren't enough to be able to feed in that compliance angle and make sure that we're adhering to legislation. So this is why we've kind of been able to make sure that the project gets given the importance that it needs. The final quote on here that I've put is, does anybody actually care about this? And again, this is where we step in and go, yes, lots of people care about this. We have lots of feedback about the inaccessibility of PDFs, but also GDS are watching us. And as part of their audits, they do pick up on institutions and public sector bodies who have inaccessible or legacy PDFs as part of their estate, and they're watching and they're monitoring that. And again, this is something that we've been able to use to our advantage when we need to rationalise why we're doing this project. The next slide, please, Alethea. Alethea will do a much better job of taking you through the elements of the project, but we launched in mid-2023. We spent a lot of time coming up with the name and a logo for the project initially before moving on to some actual work. And it's a really great joint initiative between my team, the AUE team in digital services, and Alethea and Lucy in digital operations in the marketing and communications and strategy unit. So it's a really nice opportunity to come together with them and work on something together. And I think GDS, I've just seen a question in the chat. GDS are the Government Digital Service, and they're responsible for monitoring and implementing the public sector body accessibility regulations of 2018. I think I'm going to hand over to you, Alethea.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jade. So those of us working in digital accessibility felt that we needed to be actively doing something to tackle the challenges that PDFs present. So as Jade mentioned, we recognise that this is a huge task to undertake, hence the reason this is a long-term project. We also recognise that this project needs to be handled with care, especially in the current environment where there's so much change taking place. However, change can introduce improvements and that can leverage opportunities, and that's really where this project comes in. So I'm going to talk about the project itself in a bit more detail, and then I'm going to discuss some of the research we've undertaken and our findings. So in terms of our project structure, we have an aim, objectives and scope. Our aim is made up of two parts, both of which are equally important. So our aim is to advocate the use of HTML to create accessible content and to reduce the use of PDFs where appropriate across the university. So if we take a look at our objectives, and I do really like our objectives as it kind of takes you through the actual change journey that we're undertaking on this project. So our objectives are to understand and assess the use of PDFs across the university, to raise awareness and understanding of PDF accessibility issues, to advocate the use and promote the benefits of HTML as a more accessible alternative to PDFs. And that follows on to limiting and reducing the use of PDFs across the university, and also to provide support, guidance and sharing best practice on all of the above. So Jade's already mentioned a bit about the scope. So in terms of the scope of this project, investigating the use of PDFs in a strictly academic library publishing context falls outside the scope for the project at the moment. And we've put that in because we do need to be realistic in terms of what we can achieve for this project. We're a small project group and we're working on this alongside all of the other accessibility and compliance work that we're doing. So that kind of just gives us a bit more clarity in terms of what we're trying to tackle here. So I'm now going to take a look at the research that we've conducted. So last year we conducted 2 surveys, and that was to understand how staff use PDFs and also to understand their feelings towards PDFs. Both surveys consisted of the same questions, but they were sent to different groups. So survey 1 was sent out to a sample group of staff across all areas of the university, and that sample group was independently selected by our survey panel. This approach enabled us to be confident that the survey results were not influenced by any particular areas, and it also ensured that we had a fair representation of staff. So that survey went out to 800 members of staff, and we received 140 responses, which was a response rate of 17.5%. Survey 2 went out to specific stakeholders, and these were stakeholders that the project team had already engaged with about PDF. And we felt as a project team that it was important to ensure we also capture this group's view, as it provides a much richer context for our research. So from the second group, we had 72 responses that came back. So the number of responses received indicate fairly high levels of interest in the project, and that's what we were expecting. What we then did was we took those findings and created a report, and that report has full details of the approach we took, the analysis approach, and also our results. So I'm now going to run through a very quick condensed version of our key findings. So our findings show that PDFs are widely used across the university and are a popular file format for OU staff, which is what we would expect to see. The perceived advantages of PDFs are a stable, well-designed file format that is easy to create and share. Its use as a lockdown final version is valued, and that's important because that was actually mentioned quite a few times by colleagues, but obviously that has disadvantages as well, which we'll talk about a bit later. The disadvantages of PDFs were seen as it's difficult to create accessible PDFs, they're restrictive, static, and there's various compatibility issues. Our findings also showed that there's not enough awareness of PDF accessibility issues, and there's a lot of misconceptions about PDFs. However, on a more positive note, there is a desire to move away from creating PDFs and to consider more accessible alternatives, which is great because that's what this project is all about. Our findings show that in some cases, PDF creation results from legacy processes, and this is something that we do come across very often. It would not be feasible to stop using PDFs completely. There are some cases in which PDFs are required, and we also recognise that some students do find it useful, and that's really important. We recognise that PDFs in certain situations are required, and where they're needed, they should be made accessible. So providing staff with the right information to make informed decisions, as well as training and guidance, is ultimately what's recommended. And to sort of summarise what those findings indicate, it's clear that raising awareness of the issues PDFs present, advocating for the use of HTML, sharing successes and showcasing best practice, all of these types of activities will hopefully encourage staff to engage with this initiative in a positive way, which is really ultimately what we want to do. That element of engagement and collaboration with staff is really key to this project being successful. So I'm now going to hand you over to Lucy to talk a bit more about our successes and our next steps and the resources that we've created.
Thank you. So what we have produced so far is, so we've set up our own SharePoint area for OU staff, and so that just includes all our general information, links to the project and other useful resources. So we've made ourselves like a little hub that we can share with everyone. We've then got our research and findings. So we've got the summary findings, which are useful for most staff, and then we've got the full report available there as well for staff to download if they want to have a much more in-depth review. And then we also have an area for PDF accessibility resources. And so this is an area where we can continue to add to, but at the moment it has a flow chart to help people decide if they really need a PDF. We had a lovely blog post, do you really love your PDFs, that we sent around on Valentine's Day, and it helped to dispel some of the PDF myths that we've come up against and given reasons why things have moved on. And there's also a really lovely podcast series in progress that demonstrates accessibility issues and how to start solving them, and which is really good because then it shows people practically how and why this is important. So on to the next one. So our next steps now are, following that we've finished and produced our report, is that we want to carry on with that work by conducting short interviews and hopefully some focus group discussions to try and dig deeper into some of the more knotty problems and to understand, to think a bit more about people's motivations and how we can maybe change behaviour. We're supporting staff, so we're continuing to support staff with training wherever we can, where it's appropriate, and advocating for staff to be supported to choose more accessible alternatives, because one thing is people say, well, we've always done it this way, or this is the way that we do it, and maybe they're not senior enough to drive that change. So we try and advocate as well. And the last point, which is really important, is we always want this to be a conversation, and we want to encourage participation. We never want to shame anyone for using PDFs or working a certain way. We just approach everything with curiosity. So we encourage people to come to us with queries and feedback. And we hold our regular project meetings where we discuss our project, but we also invite staff guests to come and either talk about problems or talk about something that they want to achieve. Maybe they do want to reduce PDF use in that area, and so that's their forum to come and speak to us. So it's either individuals or small groups, and we get some really, really interesting feedback and points and things to go away and look at as well. So yeah, it's like I said, it's a conversation we want to carry on with everybody. And I think that's everything. Then if you've got any questions.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. And, 2 minutes ahead of time as well. There's quite a lot of comments in the chat, so have a look at those now. What we'll do, we'll have the discussion bit after our final speaker, when we've had the Nottingham folk. Really interesting project, though. Thank you so much for the time you've put into sharing it with us, and look forward to some of the discussion shortly. What I'm going to do now, before I ask Rebecca and Martha to start, there's quite a nice segue here, because I know that Jade and her colleagues are going to be doing a session at the Digital Accessibility Conference 2025, and Julian, who's organising that, is actually on the session at the moment. So I just wonder if we can take 3 or 4 minutes for Julian to say whatever you want to say about this before we get Rebecca and Martha to speak.
Thanks for the opportunity, Alex. That's great. Yes, our Digital Accessibility Conference will be on the 25th of June, and it's shaping up to be at least as big as the event that we had last year, which was massive. We ended up with 660 people engaging with the event during the day last time. We've got 404 people signed up right now, but last year we saw the numbers grow in the run-up to the event quite considerably. So I'll put a link in the chat to the event website, and you'll be able to find all the details on there. We're running it in the same distributed format that we used before, so we're encouraging people in institutions to get your digital accessibility people together, or your learning technologists, or your librarians, or all the other people that have a stake in this, and share the day together. So book out a few rooms, and then you can sit and participate in the day as a group of people. And we found that went down really well, and certainly the event we ran at Nottingham was really beneficial for us as a local community here at the university. Before we do the conference, we're running a little survey just to collect some data on how things are changing across the sector in digital accessibility. And if you've got a couple of minutes to fill that in, we'd really appreciate it. I've just put a horribly inaccessible link in the chat for that. Apologies for that. The reason that we're doing this is to build on some longitudinal data that Alistair captured over a number of years, a few years ago. And it'll be really interesting to see how things are changing in the sector. I certainly get the instinctive impression that things are moving forward. I think things are moving forward slowly, more slowly than we would like, perhaps. But I think that when we see that data, it'll be interesting to compare and contrast to where we were 2 years ago. And we were already starting to see some changes at that point, weren't we, Alistair? Things were starting to move. So I've seen some of the data that's come in, but the more responses we have, the more representative it will be. So if people can spare me a couple of minutes, that's all it'll take you to fill that in. That would be great. We've had all the proposals in for the conference now, and we've built the programme. I'm just waiting for people to confirm. So if you have put in a proposal and you haven't confirmed it yet to me, could you do that, please? Because then we can start moving everything else forward. Otherwise, I'm going to nag you tomorrow. And we have an absolutely brilliant program. It looks better. It looks like the best event that we've put together so far. Some brilliant people and some brilliant talks. Some of the things that have moved forward. So that's all I have to say. Come and join us on the 25th of June.
Thank you very much. And from Julian at Nottingham to some of Julian's colleagues at Nottingham, I'd now like to introduce Rebecca and Martha, who have been doing a project on remediating PDFs, because of course the big problem is, okay, even if we get the HTML highway working and improve people's practice and shift people to different formats in the future, what do we do with all the stuff that already there's hundreds of students using? And there are many courses in many universities where, you know, it's an introductory sort of 101 course, loads and loads of students do it, and it can be full of all kinds of terrible PDFs. So Rebecca and Martha have taken part in a project with lovely kind of student involvement, and at Future Teacher we love hearing about student involvement. So Rebecca and Martha, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alistair, for that introduction. So as Alistair said, I'm Rebecca Thirlwall and I am an Operations Manager for Education and Student Experience at the University of Nottingham. And this afternoon, I'm going to talk through a staff-student co-creation project we delivered last year, which aimed to enhance digital accessibility in the Faculty of Social Sciences, and that was through converting existing learning materials. So I'm hoping my slides, there we go. So what I'm going to cover today is a bit about the context in which we were working in. I'm going to share a recap of the project and what we did over the course of the 6 months. I'll then share some of the really high level outputs and analysis that we were able to conduct. Then I'll move on to student and staff feedback at the end of the project. And then I'll move on to impact. So 12 months on for this project, what has the impact been? And then I'll move on to finally on to next steps. Okay, so just thinking about some of the context. So digital accessibility is a priority for the University of Nottingham and for the Faculty of Social Sciences. And there's a number of reasons for that, but you know, thinking about the student experience, we know that good digitally accessible materials can support the student experience and really enhance that learning journey for students while they're at the university. And that's because it promotes better inclusivity, better engagement from students, and then it can impact on academic success as well. We've also signed up to the public body's accessibility regulations, which I'm sure you're all aware. PSBAR sets out the regulations which are required to meet accessibility standards for digital content. So there's a lot that's been going on at the university around digital accessibility. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of those now. So we've got the Nottingham Student Accessibility Statement. So that's really been developed to outline to all our students our university commitment to digitally accessible learning materials. And we also have the Nottingham Accessibility Practices, also referred to as the NAPs. So these have been developed to provide guidance for our staff in the creation of accessible materials. And the NAPs really focus on 8 core habits that can help to make teaching material more accessible. So examples of that are structure and navigation, text, images, colour and contrast, etc. And then finally on this slide, I just wanted to pick up on some of the work that we've been doing within the faculty. So our digital learning director, Dr. Kerry Clamp, has done a huge amount of work on creating our faculty accessibility SharePoint site. And again, that's been developed to provide guidance for staff in our faculty. But one of the things I want to highlight here is the accessibility checklist that she's created. So she's pulled together the guidance from the NAPs into a really clear, simple checklist, which is available for every single module within our faculty. And what that does is it allows the module conveners to work through that simple checklist to ensure that their materials are accessible. And then I just want to take the opportunity just to mention the Students as Change Agents programme. So the SACA programme is a programme which is managed centrally at the university, and it provides funding for staff-student co-creation projects. And back in summer 2023, our faculty ESE team submitted a successful bid to basically deliver this project focused on digital accessibility.
Rebecca, could I just ask you to move your microphone just a touch away from your mouth? We're getting some blow in there. That's
okay.
perfect.
Is that better?
That's
okay.
great. Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, so the aims of the project. So the aim was to support the staff in the faculty to understand the process of converting existing learning materials. And just a bit of context, there are 7 schools within our faculty and we are the largest faculty at the university. And to deliver this, our objective was to recruit students within the faculty to convert a sample of existing learning material for autumn 24-25, really to develop good practice to support staff in schools. And when myself and Kerry were thinking about the conversion tasks that we wanted the students to focus on, we identified the following 4 tasks. So we asked the students to convert PowerPoint slides into the university accessible PowerPoint template, of which I'm using today, apply heading style and structure, create meaningful hyperlinks, and convert PDFs into Word documents, as we know, they're not as accessible as we once thought they were. So they were the tasks that we asked the students to focus on. And I'm just going to go through a quick recap of the project. So in January 2024, we recruited 8 students in the faculty to convert learning material. And the students were recruited to convert learning material in their home school so that they did have an understanding of the subject matter and familiarity with the subject matter. In February, myself and Kerry met with the Directors of Education Student Experience and the digital leads in each of the 7 schools. And just for some context here, the digital leads are academic members of staff whose role is to really raise awareness of accessibility within their school and kind of support staff within the school to make their materials more accessible. And when we had these conversations, we were working through what material each of the schools would provide for the students to convert. And our steer was very much thinking about the impact of this project, identifying material that was kind of core modules, so first year core modules, so that we knew there was a huge amount of students kind of engaging with the content once it had been converted. Then in March, our faculty learning technologist, Joe, delivered mandatory training for the students, and that kind of provided an overview of digital accessibility at the university, but also provided them with some specific training for them to kind of go on and do the conversion of material. Then in April, the students started with that conversion of material, and by the end of May, they had completed that. So the actual converting of the material was done in quite a short time frame. And then in June, I started to crack on with some analysis and evaluation.
Rebecca, I misread my note, and you actually have 2 minutes before half time.
Oh, okay, that's all right. I was quicking it up.
Yeah, no, it's fine. You've got 2 more minutes before the halfway mark. So
okay, that's fine. I can slow down a bit then.
12 minutes to go or something. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of the project output, so the students in total converted 236 documents, which was a fantastic achievement, and probably exceeded our expectations, to be entirely honest, and that was delivered by the students in 140 hours of their paid time. So yeah, a really good amount of documents converted. Just on the other half of the slide there, I've just broken it down into what that looked like by document type. So in total, that was 112 PowerPoints, 114 Word documents, and 10 PDFs. So what you can see there is it was actually a small sample size of PDFs, which is probably, hopefully, a good indicator that we don't have lots and lots of PDFs being used for our learning material. As well as asking the students when they were converting the material to identify the type of document they were converting, we also asked them to record the approximate time taken to convert that material. And the reason we asked the students to do this was that when we were having the conversations back in February with the Directors of Education Student Experience and the digital leads, they identified that they really wanted to get a better understanding of actually how long this work would take in practice. So we asked the students to record that so that we could kind of gain a better understanding of what this would look like in terms of staff workload. So before I go on to that kind of analysis around time taken to convert, I just want to highlight a few points here. So there were obviously some variables that will have affected the time taken to convert. I've listed 4 of them there. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but probably one to highlight is the complexity of material. So as I said earlier, we have 7 schools in the faculty, and at one end of the spectrum, we have the School of Geography and the School of Economics, who work with quite complex material. So they have complex images, tables, graphs. Economics have lots of equations. So it's just a recognition there that the complexity of material within our faculty does differ quite significantly. So some students would have been working with quite complex material versus students who would have been working with less complex material. So as I said, this is a very high level analysis. I did do a more detailed analysis, which I shared with each of the schools, but for the purposes of this presentation, the time taken by document type across all schools, and I'll just highlight the median value here. For PowerPoints, it was 35 minutes. For Word documents, it was 5 minutes. And then for PDFs, it was 38 minutes. So I think probably what you've probably picked up from there is that it is very time consuming to convert PDFs into Word documents. And anecdotally from speaking to the students and having attempted to do this myself, that's because when you're converting it into the Word document, it introduces a significant amount of formatting errors, and they are quite time consuming to rectify. And then the other thing I want to highlight here is that with Word documents taking 5 minutes, and we had a lot of Word documents, nearly half of the document types were Word documents, you can see that you can make impact quite quickly when converting learning material. And then I just wanted to highlight the length of document by type across all schools. So when we look at that, for PowerPoints, it was 24 slides. For Word documents, it was 4 pages. And for PDFs, it was 4 pages as well. And then just moving on to sharing some student and staff feedback with you. Oh, I'm not sure how clearly you can see that, but at the end of the project, I asked the students to complete a Microsoft Office form, and I asked them lots of different questions. But one of the questions I asked them was how easy or difficult did they find the conversion tasks? And the reason that I asked the students about this was thinking post-project and members of staff having to deliver this themselves, it was trying to just identify if there was any more support or further support we could provide staff members with this work. So a few things to highlight there. No students reported that any of the conversion tasks were very difficult. Only a small number identified that some of the tasks were somewhat difficult, and hopefully what you can see there is that creating meaningful hyperlinks was reported to be the easiest task to do. And then I just wanted to pull out some of the qualitative feedback that we got from that question. So one of the students said, at first it took a while to simply copy over the slides. It felt a bit time consuming, but as I kept working on it, it became easier to know what I needed to do. And having supervised the 8 students throughout the project, that's definitely what I was able to see. So at first they were quite tentative, they asked a lot of questions, but once their confidence grew with actually doing the conversion tasks and it became more of a habit to do it, they definitely sped up. And then the second point, and a couple of students mentioned this, so I found it difficult in deciding which heading was most appropriate depending on the content of the Word document and the general structure of the material. And I really pulled out that quote just to show that these were students converting material that they may have been familiar with, but they actually hadn't created themselves. So when we're thinking about members of staff converting their own learning material, what I suppose we would hope is that some of these tasks would be easier for them because they have more familiarity with their material. And then just moving on to staff feedback. So again, I asked staff who were involved in the project to complete a Microsoft form. 75% of staff either strongly agreed or agreed that they were happy with the quality of the converted material that students had delivered, which was really good. Of the 25% that didn't agree that it strongly agree or agree, there were some links with schools that had more complex material. So I think we can find a link there that for more complex material, it was possibly more challenging for the students to convert that material. The analysis of average time taken was deemed to be useful for the schools to work with. The project was seen to reduce workload for some, whilst others felt neutral about its impact in terms of workload. And then from many of the respondents were likely to submit more of their own material for conversion, and recommended continuing opportunities for students to convert learning materials. And something I just want to highlight here, if I've got time, I hope I have, is that following this staff and student feedback, we actually incorporated voluntary placements to do this work again into our faculty placements programme in the autumn 24-25 semester. And although we didn't recruit students for each of the 7 schools in the faculty, there were 3 students that went on to do some more work for conversion of learning material, and one of those students in one of the schools managed to convert another first year core module, so some more benefit to the schools from incorporating it into the placement programme. And then finally, just moving on to the impact of the project. So we're 12 months on from the project now, which has just absolutely flown by. And a few weeks ago, I reached out to the digital leads in each of the schools just to kind of ask them what they thought the impact of the project had been. And this is what I received back. So they said that it had raised awareness of digital accessibility in the school, which had helped them in their role as the digital lead. They said it helped staff to understand the process of converting learning material, which is good, as that was the aim of the project. The converted documents that the students had converted were being used for teaching, so we know that students are engaging with this content. And finally, the converted material had provided useful guidance and exemplification for other documents. So, and then next steps. So I'm actually going to throw this out to you as the audience. It's a question to say, how could you build on the outcomes and the findings of this project in your own institution? And thank you for listening.
That's excellent. Thank you very much.
Sharing.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. And a complete contrast in terms of the type of approach, which is exactly what we wanted to bring out here. So over to you, good folk. This is now the discussion opportunity. There are several things already in the, from both presentations, several questions in the chat that our presenters might like to respond to. But I would also say to you whether or not you can rise to the challenge that Rebecca set. How could you use a project like this? Would you be able to use a project like this in your own institution? How would you learn from what Rebecca and Martha have already done? So I'm going to stand back now and stop talking. I will just finally remind you that we do have, if you do have some technical questions, we do have some accessibility experts or a deep technical accessibility about PDFs from Jade's team sitting in the wings in the call. So if anybody does have a specific point that they think might be interesting for a wider range of people as well, do ask it.
I think I'm happy to ask some of the questions that appeared in the chat. They'll probably make it easier for people to respond. Thank you, Jade, for responding to so many of them already. But I'm kind of working backwards because some of the things have been answered by Jade. But Emily was asking Rebecca and Martha, thanks for the presentation, but how did you get the funding to pay for the students, and how were the students trained to do the conversions?
Yeah, so the funding was provided for by the Students as Change Agents fund, obviously, which is central to our university. So we received the funding through that. And in terms of training the students, so Joe, who's our faculty learning technologist, provided, it was actually an online session for an hour and a half. and the reason it was quite a short training session was that we wanted to utilise as much of the hours as possible for the students to actually convert the work. So that training from Joe, it was very much went through how to individually do each of those conversion tasks. So he shared things on his screen. So for example, creating meaningful hyperlinks, he had a page of hyperlinks and tried to ask the students what did they think wasn't meaningful, what was meaningful, and tried to explain for each of the conversion tasks. So that's how the training was delivered. And obviously throughout the course of the project, I was very much there as support for the students, and Joe was on hand as well. So we did have questions beyond the training. But I think and one of the questions we did ask the students actually in the feedback form was about the training, and the training was received really well, and the students thought it was really useful and really helpful for them. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
And it just goes to show if you can do that training in that short space of time and the students are perfectly happy to crack on with it, so much more for the subject experts who are creating these PowerPoints, you know, they should be able to do the same.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then there was another question about from Kat, were these students responsible for adding alt text? Because we know contextually that can sometimes be difficult.
Yeah, so I suppose that goes back to the conversion tasks that we chose, and I may have missed this actually, but we decided to choose those conversion tasks because we perceived them to be not simple, that's probably the wrong word, but the easier of things to do. So that's a really good example. We chose to not do alt text for images because we absolutely appreciate and recognise that can be quite challenging. So that is one thing that's the reason we kind of stayed away from some of the tasks.
Okay, thanks a lot. That's really good. And then I know Jade's already answered some of these questions, but I think it's worth repeating them in case people have missed that discussion in the chat. So I know that lots of people were asking whether there was a published version they could reference, Jade, because everyone's keen, I guess, to direct their lecturers back to engaging with this. And you've already done so much of that good work and the rationale. So you posted a link to the one page that you have about the HTML Highway project, and I'll just post it again while we're talking about it in the chat.
To be honest, when you're so busy just working on something like this in your own environment, you just kind of get things done so that they're publishable for the OU. So it still always surprises me when people want to hear what we're doing. But we have a panel discussion about PDFs, which we've managed to rope Alistair into at the Nottingham conference. And as part of that kind of panel, I think that we can certainly have a look to see what we can package up and make available as part of that those conference materials.
Thank you. I think from my working with students, one of my questions in the chat was students themselves are hanging on to the PDF because one, they can have it offline, and two, it's something they've already maybe paid some money for some software to help them with their note taking on the PDF. Three, some students have said they want to see the material in the way it was formatted by the tutor rather than any reflow. So there are all kinds of complicated reasons why students themselves are still stuck on the idea of a PDF. So I wonder if you've come across any resources. I mean, I've promoted one that Alistair and I have worked on that encourage students to learn how to note take on or with HTML. Have you done anything like that with students?
Certainly me and my team, we haven't done that. We have a student research panel of around 2,000 students, and we have done research with them about their feelings about PDFs and how they use them. There's lots of different training and education pieces that we'd like to get up and running. We're just struggling with time. But there's also making students aware that there are different formats available. And certainly OU module material is slightly different from lots of other institutions. All of our learning and teaching content is on our VLE. And you can download that in a number of different ways. So we've been drawing attention to that. But no, certainly in my team, I haven't. There are probably other people in the room who maybe have more to say about that area.
I noticed
Yeah.
Teresa's got a hand up.
Yeah, Teresa.
Well, it's just a quick reflection that there are several places in the chat where people have referred to file converters and are asking operationally, what's the process you've been using or others have been using to convert PDFs?
So everyone's going to have different ways. I mean, I think, Jade, do you want to start on that one?
Well, this is where we need to track down Stephen Price from my team. He's in the room here.
He's not in, sorry.
But I think he might have used my link because
Oh, he is. Okay, sorry.
Yay! Stephen, why don't you talk us through a couple of the difficulties about remediating PDFs?
Well, I think as you already kind of explained quite well, Jade, yeah, we've got a number of difficulties. I think the biggest difficulty with remediating PDFs is that people don't really understand the nature of the work that they need to do to make the PDF fully accessible with accessibility standards like Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So most people that I kind of work with think that all they need to do really is to make the PDF accessible so that it passes the inbuilt Acrobat Pro checker. But unfortunately, that doesn't cover all of the different success criteria within the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And most people, for example, haven't even heard of the PDF UA1 accessibility standard, which is an ISO standard, which is a more kind of technical test, and you would use the PDF accessibility checker to meet all of the requirements of that. But even then, when you've done that, you know, when you've used the inbuilt built-in accessibility checker and the pack checker, there's still more work to do to meet the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, because even the pack checker doesn't cover reflow. And of course, you need to make your PDF able to reflow as well. So you still have to do work in the order pane to make that happen. So there is quite a lot of work to do. And I think, yeah, that accessibility checker is great. It's a good starting point, but it does sometimes give people the false impression that they've made a PDF accessible when they really haven't fully made it accessible.
And I think for me, Stephen, that reinforces the point about how unwieldy a format PDF is. It's so expensive to make an accessible PDF. You know, it probably costs more than just converting it to a HTML and providing a Word document if someone wants it that way, than to remediate the actual PDF itself.
Yes, I mean, it does depend on the nature of the document and how complex the PDF is, but yes, it's basically sometimes it is easier to do that.
To answer Teresa's question, at York, we've got Abby Fine Reader, which we use a lot to, you know, make sure we've got all the structural tagging and things like that. I've mentioned we use MathPix for anything that's mathematical or handwritten maths. But the additional part about the handwritten maths is that if it was just handwritten maths on a blank sheet of paper, that would be one thing, but it never is, because they like to throw us the hardest things possible. We have handwritten maths on checked paper where they have crossed out items in the equation, because maths is storytelling, and then they squiggle diagrams, not in sequence, but to the side of it. Then they draw arrows to refer back to previous things. So it becomes a picture story, more like cave art than anything else. So you've got to think sometimes it's not a conversion of pictures or PDF to text. It's actually converting a picture into an actual learning resource. Alice has her hand up.
Yeah, it was just to pick up on the Abby Fine. So yeah, that's what we use certainly in the library for the out format process. And I am a huge fan of Abby Fine Reader because it has that real granularity that you can do tiny adjustments like stripping out footers and things like that if you need to, if you know that a screen reader user needs that. It's just for kind of wider use with PDF editing. It does feel a bit sledgehammer to crack a walnut. It's not the easiest thing for people to pick up. And if we tend to find people often have a lot of accessibility fear or IT, like digital skills fear, and giving them Abby tends to terrify them a bit. So I think it's fantastic if you have to do really heavy editing, but it does feel a bit scary, I think, for some other people. The other thing I wanted to mention that we have had some success with, that my colleague Tom Smith in Faculty IT has done around the handwriting recognition, has been with archive materials, using I think it was the Google LM notebooks, around being able to use some level of OCR and AI around that, and doing that through, we are a Google institution, we have a notebook LM thing covered with security, because these are unpublished materials, and some of them we were looking at, an academic was working with archives from coal mining, and it was from the 1980s strike and process, and there was a lot of kind of quite sensitive data in that. Was doing it in a secure way rather than using third-party tools. So if that's something people are interested in, I think it's something we'd like to try and bring out. But I'd come at it from OCR and he'd come at it from the AI. But we've had quite a lot of success with that, with the Notebook LM, with that.
That's really interesting. Alice, while we've got you, you also made some comments about publishers and some of the difficulties you'd had with publishers and ebooks and things. Do you want to say anything about that?
Anyone who works on, so I'm do a lot of the library side of this, the accessibility stuff. So I can probably tell you about inaccessible publishing materials till the cows come home. But, and anyone on here who's more familiar with that side of things probably will too. It's the usual thing. Some of them are OCR, a lot of them aren't. So even the quite basic thing, as you say, it does tend to be old ones. So I think with JSTOR, I haven't worked out the exact year. There doesn't seem to be one, but things pre-2000 don't tend to be OCR. Things post-2010 generally are. And then there's a kind of blurry period of, it may or may not be. But even even things where we've contacted a publisher and said quite specifically that we have a student with no sight and a PDF is fine, but we need it to be an accessible PDF, we need it to have image descriptions because this is a book that has an awful lot of diagrams. They've sent us stuff that's not in the right format and other things. And ultimately, I think sent us an EPUB, which the student couldn't access, which I had to then convert into a PDF. But often the people that you're contacting at the publisher don't seem to know. They'll send you a copy and you're like, that's exactly what you've got in your repository. So even the publishers don't seem to have great awareness of the accessibility of some of their documents. But some of them, people mentioned things like data as image is a really big problem that we find, but also just complete lack of image descriptions. So the kind of OCR PDF is getting better, but as soon as you add in any complexities of kind of subject specialism, it goes.
And structural tagging is so important. I will just mention here RNIB collections. If you're trying to get hold of accessible content for students, there are some issues. If anybody's got some issues with RNIB collections at the moment, do get in touch with me. I'll put my email in here in a minute because we're trying to get a meeting with them because we feel there are ways that we could constructively work to help that service be more effective for HE. So do get in touch if you've got some things you'd like to talk about. So thank you very much. Sorry, Lillian, I just wanted to use Alice's experience while she was there.
No, absolutely. The chat's really kind of full of discussion, so it's quite interesting. It's worth looking through the discussion after the webinar because you might have missed something. All I'll say is that I have been re-adding URLs that people have kindly made into accessible hyperlinks, but I've re-added them as full URLs because when you download the chat, the URLs are embedded in such a way that you can't actually get at them, so you can lose the URL down after the Zoom call itself. So I've re-entered and made the full URLs available so that they're not lost. And it's just an example of how one part of the system is trying to make things accessible, but it causes inaccessibility in another format. So this has been a very exciting webinar, actually. I feel like I've learned so much because we've zoomed in on a very specific element, whereas maybe sometimes we talk about inclusive practice in a very general and broad sense, but I certainly personally feel there's been quite a few actionable things from today's session that I can learn from the two, Nottingham and from OU. So thank you very much. And I think at this point, usually Ron starts to prompt us to invite us to kind of add what one thing are you going to do as a result of attending today's session. And I think I'll leave Ron to as well mention signups for the next webinar.
Thanks, Lillian. It's already in the text chat. Just a reminder for people to share what one, real action, rather than just follow up on reading the resources or whatever, one real action that you would do as a result. And yes, if you've had a link to the registration page where you registered for today and has the today's session, if you refresh that, and I'll put the link in the text chat, it should have the registration form for the June session, although not an awful lot of information yet apart from just the title and date. But the registration form is there for 26th of June, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. as always.
We do already have one speaker fixed. We're just trying to pin down a second speaker.
Well, it's a good time to ask if anyone here would like to present a little bit on UDL, yeah.
Yeah, we're especially interested in people who have gone from a non-UDL approach to their teaching to embracing UDL, talking about the impacts that's had, the impact on their own workload, the impact on their students, and so on. So we're looking for a very practical kind of experience-based reflection. So anybody that can do that, and maybe even bring along a student who can tell what their perspective is, that would be brilliant. So let us know in the chat or contact us through the Future Teacher JISC mail list, which I will attempt to put in the chat pane in a moment.
I think there was one more question from Mike earlier that I spotted about whether anybody had good templates in Word that also provided advice to people about how to create a more accessible PDF after they've made the adjustments in Word in the first place. And certainly in York, we do that when we're training people about creating accessible documents. We show them all the finicky ways where they need to tick a box when they're saving it as PDF. And then I also usually show them how to make sure they add something to the title and to the tags area, because for whatever reason, those are the ways to generally ensure you get your 100% accessibility score in Blackboard Ally, for instance. But that's not to say it makes although technically it makes the PDF come up with 100% accessible score, that's still not always, it seems like you're just trying to hit that 100% accessibility score by ticking those few little buttons. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to stop the recording here.